Glad you're here today. It's the future of TV from prime time to multi-platform. Wall Street analysts meet entertainment executives. I'm going to read the short write-up of the context for this panel just to make sure everybody understands the point that we're going to be bringing out. The future of TV is not just about the technology that is in place today and that which is on the horizon. The future of TV involves deep insight into both the qualitative and quantitative aspects of content production and distribution, and the impact that the technology may have on the many competitive and high-stakes business models in place today and anticipated for tomorrow, shaped in part by the myriad of devices and content vying for our attention. Also fundamental to the future vision of this important medium is how consumer behavior will impact the medium, i.e. what customers want, are willing to pay for, and how much. It's an evolving business where there may not be a normal in the future. I think that's going to be borne out many, many ways. Analysts, by definition, work at the intersection of business and technology and regularly monitor the metrics that form the foundation. Our distinguished group of analysts and executives will discuss, debate, and even challenge some of the basic premises that are important as we look to the future of TV in an informative and engaging panel. Now, there's a prediction. So we're going to ask each of the panelists to take a moment to tell you who they are, where they work, what they do, and how that ties into what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to start with my immediate left, Cindy McKenzie from PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Hi, I'm Cindy McKenzie. I'm Managing Director, PwC's Entertainment and Media Practice. I've been there about a year and a half. Among other things, I do a lot of the research on TV and video consumption habits, hence why I'm here. And before I was at Pricewaterhouse, I spent 12 years at Fox and 6 years at Sony Pictures, so long history in entertainment. So,
thank you. And to her left, Larry Namer.
Hi, Larry Namer. Here in the U.S., probably better known as the founder of E! Entertainment TV, but more recently have started a media company in China, and I pretty much live in Beijing for the past 5 years.
And to his left, Michael Pachter.
Michael Pachter. I'm a research analyst at Wedbush Securities. I cover a bunch of participants in the value chain of entertainment content, so primarily games, music, movies. Less so television. The big media guys are too complicated for me. I have no experience in media other than as a consumer, which actually has been great for me because I tend to view all participants in the value chain as rational, and therefore I'm not at all burdened by preconceived notions about the way things should be.
And it helps to form an opinion on a lot of matters, even if you have to kind of pull it out of somewhere.
And I do pull it out of something.
There you go. And to his left, Dunia Turil from Nielsen.
Dunia Turil from Nielsen. So I work primarily on our distribution, measurement of kind of content distributed across different platforms, both linear and digital, and the impact that has on our clients who obviously look to Nielsen for the high quality measurement standard in both linear and digital measurement.
And to her left, David Watkins, Strategy Analytics.
Hi, good morning, everyone. David Watkins, Strategy Analytics. I'm an analyst at the company. Strategy Analytics is a global research consultancy focused on the firms that are competing for the digital consumer, be it in the home, on the move, or in their car. And we cover the whole value chain through from content, distribution of that content, and the devices that content is played back on across all of those three areas. So I head up our connected home devices service, forecasting the uptake of traditional consumer electronics products across TV and video, home audio, games, and PCs.
Well, thank you. And my name is Marty Schindler of the Schindler Perspective. We have a husband and wife consulting practice. I'm the husband. And between us, we have a Big Four professional service firm, top 5 business school background, and hands-on experience at companies such as 20th Century Fox, MGM, Lucasfilms, Industrial Light and Magic, Kodak Cinesite, and Bank of America. We've worked at nearly every point on the horizontal and vertical value chain tied into entertainment and entertainment technology. So you can see we've got a great group of people here to cover this topic. I want to do a short poll first. I'm going to ask a couple of questions. Quick show of hands. How many people are cord nevers in the room? Nobody. Cord cutters? Okay. How many people get their TV over the air? Solely? Okay. Purchase HBO subscribers, Netflix subscribers? Big show of hands there. Just a couple more. Hulu? Hulu Free, Hulu Plus, Amazon. How many people have a DVR? Okay. Flat panel TV? Anybody got a 4K TV? All right. How about a smart TV? Okay. Well, very good. That all ties in. I'm glad you're here today. So here's for the panel. When we met here a few months ago, there were a lot of significant events going on. Aereo was a few months away from being decided. The Comcast, Time Warner, and AT&T DirecTV mergers and acquisitions were fairly recent announcements. CBS and Time Warner had a major standoff for a while, and the Time Warner Dodgers fiasco was not quite a fiasco. There were a lot of changes in the air. So the topic is really upheaval. I led off then with a question as to whether all of the major issues in process, not just those that were mentioned, as to whether we were going through an upheaval, not just a series of changes. Some events often seem to be major at the time, but do not have long-lasting effects. Others are shifting with no turning back. Is that still the opinion? Are we going through a period of upheaval? What are the matters that matter today and which apply to the U.S. and perhaps more profoundly to the major markets such as China specifically and Asia broadly? David?
Sure, yeah. I mean, my initial thoughts really, we've seen a little bit in the press over the last couple of years about the impending death of television, but we say that television certainly is not dying. In fact, it's probably going through the biggest change in its 80-year plus history at the moment. We from a devices perspective, where I'm from, it's certainly true that TV displays, traditional TV displays themselves, is a mature business. It's probably no surprise it is 80 years old. And certainly TV displays themselves are going to be a fairly flat market. The number of TVs in use is going to stay broadly stable over the coming years. But TV is not just about traditional TV sets. It's about a multitude of other screen devices as well, from PCs, particularly mobile PCs, which have been growing strongly, through to tablets and smartphones. And the number of actual TV addressable screens in use today globally is now 5 billion, over 5 billion. That's going to grow to close to 8 billion by 2018, and it shows no signs of slowing down. So clearly huge growth in the number of screens, TV addressable screens that consumers have. And additionally, clearly more and more people are accessing OTT TV services. We've done a consumer survey recently suggesting that over 60% of US consumers, over 50% of European consumers are now accessing OTT TV services at least once a month. That continues to grow quarter on quarter.
So does that constitute an upheaval? Are we in it, Michael?
No, I was fine. Oh, he can finish.
Okay.
I think so. I think it's a huge change. We're seeing much more complex TV viewing behaviors now amongst consumers. Of course, there are traditional viewers still. We call them. We've just actually finished a study of 6,000 US and European consumers. And 33% of them we still classify as couch potatoes. They're traditional TV viewers. They're not interested in online TV. They're not interested in engaging in social media around TV. However, we also identified that 55% of all those consumers can now be placed into one of 4 non-traditional TV viewing segments. be that multi-screeners, they're using multiple screens to access TV. They're engaging constantly with social media like Facebook and Twitter, following hashtag Twitter accounts for TV. So I think we're going through a profound change in the way consumers are engaging and consuming TV content.
Okay, Michael?
I think your use of the term upheaval requires more context, and I think you have to look at it either from the point of view of the people causing the upheaval or from the point of view of the people who are going to respond to it. So yes, the cause is there. Yes, technology has changed. Yes, we can get over-the-top television. We can watch television anywhere, wherever we want, on any device, any show, just about, if we're willing to pay for it. But as a consumer, no. The upheaval's nice, but the consumer, and we were talking about this heading in here, 4K TV, great, amazing technology. There's no content, so who cares? 3D TV was great 5 years ago. Who cares? Over-the-top TV, until this week, who cares? Mm-hmm. Because there wasn't anything that you really wanted to see real time. You know, as Fox deals with Hulu, 8-day delays. You can't get sports over the top. You will be able to, because now CBS is going over the top. So you're going to get NFL games possibly.
CBS says no on
that. Yeah, because the NFL has reserved that. But again, that's the upheaval. So the upheaval from the consumer perspective is, I want to get everything when I want it, and everything means live broadcast. It means the current episode of Blacklist, so I want to watch it today. And if you pay attention over the top television, if you decide you want to watch the Blacklist and you are an NBC cable subscriber, try watching last season, because it's not there. Why isn't it there? Because Warner Brothers held the rights back. Why? Because they're greedy pigs and they knew they could. No, I don't blame them. They're greed. I use greed a lot in the Gordon Gekko sense. It's a really good term. But the only way that you're going to have upheaval from the consumer perspective is if it makes sense for the content owners to monetize that way. And that means they can get more. If they can't get more, they're not going to do it, with the exception of CBS, because I think that they're generally pretty stupid about this. And so they tend to be first and they regret it later. Starz was first with Netflix and regretted it later. So Disney just signed the deal with Netflix a year ago that starts in 2016. They don't regret it because they raped Netflix. If you can get more money, then you're going to deliver to people. So think about this in the context of the cell phone. When you all got cell phones, at least those of you with gray hair, you paid an awful lot and you got a little. You used to pay $100 or more a month for service. You got 30 minutes of talk time. And we used to think about that. We would actually pay attention and hang up quickly. Now you pay $100. I just did this. 4 iPhone 6s, $100 a month. We share 28 gigabytes of data. Unbelievable. Like, what do I get? How is that a better deal for the telecom provider? It's actually not for me, because they were getting 100 from me for one phone. It's a great deal for them because it's so affordable. There are 400 million cell phones out there in the US. I mean, I don't even know how there are more phones than people, but there are. So the point is, they're getting more money in the aggregate. That's what the content guys are going to do. They want to give us TV anywhere. And again, how many of you subscribe to cable? A lot of you, $85 a month. How many of you would pay $125 a month if you could get any TV show ever made on demand? Any show ever. So you could get season 1 of The Blacklist. You could get I Love Lucy. You could get Dick Van Dyke, Twilight Zone, on demand. Yeah, I would pay $50 a month more for that. Not everybody would, but 1 million people would. What do you know? 600 million more in the system. It'll happen. So again, if they said on any device, anytime, hotel room in Hungary, watch HBO Go, what a good deal. So I think it's going that way, but we're not there yet because the content owners determine how that's going to roll out. And again, with the exception of CBS, none of the major guys are dumb enough to let this happen without extracting a pound of flesh.
Anybody else on that before we move on? Let's move on. So let's talk about getting content to the TV. You know, there are now slightly more TV households in the US that have broadband connections than pay for video. It seems there's no going back on that, hence the comment Michael had about OTT. Various networks have built out infrastructure to make their systems more robust. In my case, Time Warner Cable recently offered to upgrade my 20 megabit line to 100 at no additional charge. Ties in with Michael's concept. Google Fiber is most likely going to expand its reach and they've already frightened AT&T in its own neighborhood of Austin and in San Antonio. The competition with the amount of data allowed for a low price coming through the cellular network has the potential for significant disruption without all of the capital expenditures. Michael's comment about 28 gigs of data, that's a fair amount of data that you could tether your phone conceivably. So the stage is set. So the question really is, and given the announcements you were talking about, how far off are we from a total streaming universe? Larry?
Well, my recent experience has been, in China and stuff, and just to give you some sense of the scale of it, there's, 1 billion people who have cell phones, 500 million of which are smartphones. There's 400 million people who consume media on the internet, video media, which gives you a nice large base. The nice part about working in the market is there's not a lot of legacy in terms of technologies, in terms of business deals, et cetera. So when you really look at the market and what we're doing there, we're really forced to figure out new ways of doing business. I'm a content creator, but I like to own what I create. So that's why I choose to be in places like China as opposed to the US these days. But you look at the people consuming media on the internet in China, what are they consuming? They're consuming traditional television. But that television then extends in different ways across multiple platforms, and the way that you relate to not just the distribution platforms, but the brands that want to participate in that is changed dramatically. So we give you the last show that we did, made for the web, a thing called Modern Life, traditional half-hour sitcom. Average viewership is 40 million. Which is kind of a nice number, and it would make NBC, ABC, and CBS wish they can combine all their numbers and get to that number. So, but the real thing is not just the creation and taking advantage of what all these technology platforms are capable of, but it's then coming up with the business model. So it's kind of totally changed. It's totally different than the way business is done here when you have all this legacy stuff.
Anybody else on that, Dunya?
I think in all the conversation we're having, we are stepping out of kind of the consumer, right? Consumer experience is at the heart of what is going to drive anything in this business. And so whether you're talking about the ubiquitous nature of streaming content, or you're talking about devices, the ultimate is that consumers seek content. And they see quality produced, professionally produced content. And so they don't really care where it's coming from. They'll find it wherever it is, and that's a wonderful opportunity for them. So I think, back to the initial question, the upheaval is on the business side. It's not on the consumer side, because to them, it's kind of a seamless transition of availability. And I think that's a key measure. I also feel that, we have this conversation about television and cord nevers, which I have a little bit of trouble with, because, who here doesn't have a cord? You have a cord. It might be an internet cord, right? You might not have that traditional television. And, last year, Nielsen expanded its, television household definition to include those people who viewed content via broadband connection. It's a cord, and you're paying for it. And as a consumer, you're paying for it, and you have content. And then on top of that, because you don't have everything you want, you pay for Netflix and you pay for Hulu Prime, and pretty soon you're going to be able to buy HBO, right? I mean, that's a big deal. So, I like to think that we have, this antiquated, or I think we have this antiquated notion of talking about television as kind of a physical presence, and TV is about TV content, and distribution is about all of the platforms and all of the devices that that content can live on.
And Donnie is right that it's going to be slow to evolve because the content owners are kind of set in their ways. But when it does evolve, it's foolish to think that it's going to be an upstart like Netflix that's going to win. It's going to be an upstart like Comcast that's going to win, because Comcast completely understands this. And so that cord that we all have is static. It's one way. You view content as distributed to you when they tell you it's coming. The internet is two-way. You get to choose what you want when you want it. That's why people like it. Comcast will give us that with Xfinity. So I think actually that happens. Two anecdotes. One is Tower Heist, and the other is Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon 2. Two movies. Nobody saw Tower Heist. I think it did $20 million at box office. And the studios decided to try something clever and charge $30 for the movie to be viewed in home, I think 2 weeks after theatrical. And the 4 major theatrical exhibitors boycotted the film, wouldn't show it on their screens. Crouching Tiger announced a week ago, Netflix is going to show it real day and date with the movie, exclusive on Netflix and some IMAX screens. The same big 4 who control 54% of all screens and who control 65% of all IMAX screens said, you're not showing on our IMAX screens. So there's a lot to be lost by going over the top. And the exhibitors aren't content owners. The exhibitors are just a distributor of content. They're going to resist. The studios don't like that. They're going to resist. The TV networks, as I said, CBS is stupid. The other guys are not. They're going to resist. So it really does come down to, if the content's available, sure. If the content's not, no. You're going to see it with movies first. And so far, movies are 0 for 2 for anybody trying to do any kind of an early window. And I think that's going to last at least another 10 years, at least. And I'd say maybe our lifetimes.
Well, if you come to my 1045 panel today, I've got both AMC theaters and IMAX on the panel. So that's going to be part of the conversation. 10 years is a pretty long window. You got an opinion on that,
yeah,
Cindy?
I guess my view is it's changing faster than you're saying. I think consumer consumption and what people are doing and why they're doing it is driving things. Just the announcements this week with CBS and HBO, and this morning Lionsgate and Tribeca, right? It's happening. And if you look at the way people are actually viewing, it's fundamentally changed, right? We just did a survey again on video consumption, and one of the comments we asked was, is it more social or less social? And the answer was both, right? It was less social for the family because everybody was watching on different screens, different shows in different rooms, right? And so there wasn't oh my God, my show's on, the whole family comes into one room and watches. They're all watching whatever they want to watch on whatever device they want to watch it on. And then it's more social because that whole, I want to know what's happening with the show that's out right now, and I have to know what it is, and because I have to be part of that water cooler conversation or that social conversation. That's a fundamental change, and it's changed the way people find content. It's changed the whole way pilots are done. I mean, all of that is changing, and consumers actually force the content providers and distributors to change. And to me, we've been talking about TV for the last 2 years. What's happened has been exponentially faster than I think people thought it was. And all it takes is one big player like HBO to make a decision like they did, that everybody else has to come along. And I just, personally, I think the consumers are driving this and will continue to drive it because of the way they consume. And we talked about mobile. To me, that especially outside of the U.S., but in the U.S. as well, and certain demographic groups like Hispanics, they watch TV on mobile devices, on phones, not on TVs, not on even tablets anymore. And so, that changes the dynamic as well. So I think it's changing faster, and that the business is going to catch up because it just takes one big player, and they have to, and they all kind of tumble.
David?
Yeah, I mean, I'm based in Europe, so just from a European perspective, we're already seeing the major pay TV operators there already putting their content online. Sky B is a classic example. They've developed a box which is actually made by Roku, the Sky Now box, and all of their premium offering is now available to non-pay TV customers online. And we're seeing that as a growing trend that major operators around Europe are making that content available to all consumers, not just their usual customers. So certainly, I agree. I think it is moving very, very quickly.
Larry?
Yeah, I think, I mean, if you look at Asia, I mean, it's already happened. I mean, it's going that way. I mean, that's the way the people with money in China are 25 to 40-year-old. They're much younger than any place else in the world. And they consume media on the web, which means you've got to adapt the way you create media and the way people relate to the media, and tying in commerce and social and stuff like that. But it's already happened, and there's no turning back. The U.S., unfortunately, you know, is a little bit isolationist. We think we're leading the world in this stuff, and we're not. We're actually behind. And the portion of the world that the U.S. provides content to keeps getting smaller. Everybody else is growing in that respect. So everybody's got to start to face the fact that it's happened. It's already happened. The U.S. is behind. So maybe it's going to take the U.S. a little longer to get there, but they better get there quick.
And we've been behind on a lot of different things over the years. So in terms of content creation, is there going to be a time when more stuff comes out of places other than the U.S.? I mean, the Hollywood industry, if you will, has always been one of the major contributors to the balance of payments on a positive side, given that 70% or so of the revenues for the studios and others comes from outside of North America. You're developing content in China. Others is in India and then Brazil and Russia and other places. Or is that going to grow, or is it ever is it always going to be resident in that country and not get out to us?
Well, I think, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that needs to stay in country. That is just simply certain things you're going to create for China are going to be very China-centric, and they're not going to travel anyplace else. But there are other shows. We use the internet in China as kind of a testing ground for testing formats of shows that can then be taken to other places. So even when we do sitcoms, we have this 80-20 rule, and when we create them and write them, and that's 80% of the content has to have a universal theme that we could take that show anywhere else, and 20% is localized to the market. So it makes creating the India version or the US version or anything, you know, relatively simple compared. But, you know, the big change for a content creator such as myself is, it used to be fairly simple. Is I create a half-hour show, I put it on TV, I look at a Nielsen number, and you know, then I charge the advertisers based on, you know, what my Nielsen number is. It's no longer like that. And you know, while the U.S. still tries to hold on to that, there's a lot more stuff. There's a lot more metrics that need to be considered. For example, in this new show that we have, that's online. It's a half-hour sitcom in a very traditional sense, but it then takes advantage of social media and particularly social commerce. But we create there's one of the big sponsors of the show is Bacardi. So in the show, one of the characters decides to be a bartender, and where does he go? He goes to Bacardi bartender school. But we really, over the season, create that character to be a brand ambassador for Bacardi. So then if you go to while he may come home and say, hey, I learned how to make margaritas, and you may see that in the show. If you go to the Bacardi website, you'll actually see Jerry. You know, you click on you know, anything, Bloody Mary, and there's Jerry, who you've already gotten to know from the show, teaching you how to make it. When Bacardi is opening when there's a new bar or a club opening in Shanghai, and Bacardi is the primary liquor sponsor, they'll advertise it as come to blah, blah, blah thing and come and meet Jerry from Modern Life. So when we create these shows and create these characters, we got to think well beyond what the TV rating is and how that we're going to be able to relate to that brand. I mean, words that, you know, used to be, again, fairly simple. You know, you got a Nielsen number and you lived off of that. You know, now I'm confronted every day with words like engagement, activation. I mean, people want to know actually, you know, okay, so somebody saw it, then what?
So you use the 80-20 for a moment. Have you actually tested that, number one? And number two, if that product, the Bacardi show, for example, was shown here, it would be looked at as blatant product placement, and it would get it might be a turnoff. So has the 80-20 rule worked for you outside of China? What has been the acceptance, if you've even tested it?
Well, first of all, we call it story integration, not product placement.
Okay.
It's a much more palatable word. But no, we actually have our first series that we've created in China that will get unveiled in the U.S. in late 2015. I can't tell you exactly which one it is, but yeah.
But the product placement thing is actually becoming a differentiator, right? It isn't just a bad thing as long as the product placement is applicable to the show. I mean, I was talking to somebody from another studio who had a home improvement show, and they did a lot of the advertising with a home improvement store. And it turns out that ended up, the feedback they got from viewers was they liked that connection. The store got an uptick in sales. So I think part of it is really making sure that it's brand appropriate, and then it is not necessarily perceived as a negative. And that's the whole concept of targeted advertising, right? Make it something that's applicable to me and means something to me, and then it becomes a value add, not a negative. And especially when we're talking mobile, if you can, integrate that in as a secondary experience, or ads in lieu of fees, there's things, as long as it's relevant to the person who's watching it or adds to their experience.
Okay. Anybody else on that?
Marty, we're all saying the same thing different ways, but there's 2.5 billion people on the internet. So sure, 2.5 billion is a better addressable market than the cable market. Of course it is. I don't know how many cable households are globally. It's under 500 million. It's probably 300 million. So 80-20, let's say it's 500 million. But those 500 million spend $85 a month, and the 2.5 billion don't. And you can advertise to them. You can product place to them. There's plenty of ways to make money. Eyeballs are worth something. That's why the content owners came up with the concept of windows. So content is windowed, period. And you go to your highest value window first. That's why I gave you the theatrical exhibition example. That's the highest value window. The next highest value window is DVD release, then VOD. Television is way down the line. Free internet is way, way, way down the line. Netflix gets movies 8 years after they're in the theater, unless they sign up with a premium content provider like Epix. They can create their own content. Good luck with Adam Sandler, but they're not going to ever rival Hollywood. Not going to happen. So I guess what I'm saying is the high value window, I think, remains intact for 10 years. I don't mean you're not going to get content. You get it now. We're going to get more and more and more content, and you're going to come up with alternative programming, which is you. It finds a market, and you're creating something and creating tremendous value because you're suddenly available to 500 million people that you couldn't sell cable TV to. That totally makes sense to me. But you're not going to see the blacklist day and date put on a telephone in China. Not going to happen. It's going to show here, and then maybe a year or 2 or 3 later, it'll show up on Netflix if they're willing to pay for it.
Dunya?
Yeah, I think I'm going to have to, kind of respectfully disagree, because I think on the I think on the movie side, right? It's very it's going to be different, and windowing in theatrical is some black box, and you have some people who have the theaters control a lot of that business. So putting that aside, possibly, that's a harder model to break. But also, a movie is a one-time event. So, you miss it as a consumer, you miss it, it's been talked about, and then you can forget about it. And then it comes up, a year and a half later, 2 years later, and you think, oh, I had missed that, now I'm going to see it. So you don't have that same connection. Now, the blacklist, I would argue, you can absolutely find anywhere. And piracy.
Legally?
No, but this is the problem, right? Piracy, and this is anecdotal, but I was abroad last week, and someone I was with decided they wanted to watch Scandal, and were very excited. They said they were going to do their work, go watch Scandal. It wasn't work at all for them. And she was gone a really long time, so she came back down, and she had, subscribed to Hulu, and she was going to go. Now, she was abroad, so she discovered very quickly that she couldn't find Scandal. She spent 45 minutes, and because she had never looked to pirate content, right? Had she pirated content before, she would have found it in 35 seconds, if that. But she had a strong desire. She was watching it that day after it aired, and she found it. And I think piracy really opens up this the box that is windowing, and it changes the rules of the game. Because again, it's about the consumer, and the consumer wants what they want when they want it. And I think it was interesting the way you were saying about, they're driving it. And I had said, it's not an upheaval to the consumer. I think it's still valid that it's not an upheaval to them because they are driving it, and it's an upheaval to everyone else.
Oh, anybody else before we move on? All right, we're going to move on for a moment. So we know it's going to be somewhere between now and 10 years for that to transition. In the meantime, we've got these myriad of devices. We've talked about connected devices, the Chromecast, Roku, Apple TV, Fire TV, game consoles, Blu-ray players. So there's no shortage of ways to connect. Let's take a quick poll. How many people have one of those devices? How many people have a Chromecast? Roku? Okay. Apple TV? Fire TV? Oh, actually, I should paraphrase or change that to use that device to connect. The obvious ones are, to connect to the internet. All those that I mentioned are. Blu-ray players, how many people have a Blu-ray player? And how many people with that Blu-ray player actually connect to the internet? Like Netflix is available on most Blu-ray. Okay. So what we're going to have to go through a transition before that Ethernet cable or that wireless device connects directly into the TV on new TVs. There's going to be a replacement cycle. How long is that replacement cycle going to take, and what will be the devices that connect us as TV viewers to the internet through our current TVs until that happens? David?
Yeah. Can we ask another question to the audience? The people that have a, I would call a digital media adapter, so a Chromecast, an Apple TV, or a Roku box.
I mean, in total?
In total.
Okay.
And then keep your hand up if you actually own a integrated smart TV as well. So yeah, we're seeing a lot of that. Multiple ownership of these devices is rife. A lot of people are owning digital media adapters like Chromecast. They're also owning smart TVs. They've perhaps also got a connected Blu-ray player as well. And it all boils down to which device you're going to use is the user experience on that device. And clearly the Chromecast has been hugely successful. It's sold millions already because it's incredibly simple, incredibly easy to use. And you're using the user interface that's on your smartphone or your tablet. And we're used to that user interface. We're comfortable with using it. I think it's fair to say that smart TV user interfaces have been relatively clunky, very difficult to use, very difficult to input text into any search display. But having said that, the interfaces are improving with each wave of smart TVs that comes through. We're seeing now implementation of voice control, of gesture control on these devices, which is making it easier for consumers to access the content they want. So in terms of the build-up of devices, smart TVs will no doubt become the #1 device installed in consumers' homes. Today, it's games consoles that offer that internet connectivity to the large screen. And usage will vary hugely depending on which device consumers have in their home. But I suspect that there will be a migration towards usage on smart TVs over time as the functionality of a dedicated streaming box moves into the TV. The user experience on smart TVs starts to improve. However, I think it will be nuanced. I think we'll see all of these devices being used depending on the content that consumers want to access and the place in the home that they're accessing that content.
Larry, you look like you're about to say something or not, because otherwise I will.
Go ahead.
Okay. How about a quick definition of smart TV, just so everybody has a clear understanding of what that is. If you haven't been to CES and don't look at all the manufacturers, let's give a quick definition of that, please.
I mean, from our standpoint, a smart TV is an integrated television display with internet capabilities. So it offers you the ability to access popular streaming services like Netflix or BBC iPlayer directly through the TV. It may or may not have a integrated web browser, but it's likely to have an application store that you can download more apps from social networking through games and other video services.
So it's similar to like a Windows 8, for example. We're going to have an app to click on, and that's going to be my NBC app, perhaps. That's going to be my ESPN app. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah.
Okay. So you can't have this conversation without talking about the cable companies and the satellite companies and bundling. In a way, consumers continue to resist outrageous costs for programming. Sports is often the genre that is really most aligned, not aligned, maligned by the consumer. ESPN and Turner just announced a long-term NBA deal, like a 9-year deal for a lot of money. That's going to escalate costs. So you tie that into the HBO announcement recently that was heralded by a lot of people as a turning point. I think most people would agree with that. CBS, even Univision, given the market that we were talking about, is now launching a service. So are we going to get to a point where most of this is going to be unbundled? Is it going to be more products like Dish and Verizon are offering for streaming packages as opposed to traditional delivery? What does that look like in terms of how we're going to pay for it? And will people pay for it? And will the sum of individual things like buying HBO and CBS be higher than the cost of what we're paying today? That's a complex question.
The smart way for a consumer to access this stuff is to get rabbit ears. You can get HD rabbit ears, get a Netflix subscription, get an HBO subscription, and that gets you live sports and live broadcasts, but you lose AMC, you lose all the cable companies. The response from the content owners is going to be to pull network broadcasts off the air. And Fox has already said that they would stop broadcasting on Channel 11 here. I don't know, whatever it is, the Fox Broadcast Network, and make it a cable channel. Disney, which nobody seems to pay attention to because they're such a small player, has moved live sports off of network. You just announced that TNT and ESPN are going to sign basketball. Live sports is increasingly moving away from broadcast. There's a reason for that, to force you to subscribe. So that's not going a la carte. And that's what we were talking about, CBS broadcasting and holding back football. They're not holding back football because they want to. They're holding it back because the NFL wants to. So I honestly think the reason people subscribe to pay television is for live sports. And we would have rabbit ears. Eventually, cheap people will have rabbit ears until the content's not there, and then rabbit ears don't make sense. So again, I know I'm beating a broken drum. Don't lose sight that the content guys control this. And you can pirate a live broadcast signal as well, but very few people know how. Piracy killed music. The content guys on the film content side are consumed with stamping out privacy. In the US, the pirate site guy is going to go to jail. Not so in many other countries, but I think the Pirate Bay guys went to jail, and they were Swedish, I believe. There are countries in Europe and the US that will enforce anti-piracy laws. And if you send one or two guys to jail, it's going to be a lot harder to find pirated content. But the content guys get it, and they make the most money from that cable window. So they're not going to let that go away willingly.
So when we were here a few months ago, I know you personally were not, but we were having this discussion with this panel a few months ago. Those rabbit ears, they were called Aereo.
Yeah.
Okay. Other than the legalities of that, and we're not here to debate that because I know that's a tough point for some of us. But nevertheless, those rabbit ears, that was the intent. That would have been what Barry Diller and company would have added on to that. You could get those other things. You never know. They might be back. Maybe under a different name. It's happened before that a product or service that gets put down for whatever reason today reappears in a slightly different format 5, 10, 12 years later. So given what we're talking about, is HBO a threat to Netflix now with their streaming service? No? You're shaking your head?
Not at all. They have almost zero content overlap. I mean, HBO has Warner, Fox, and Universal Motion Pictures. For the first 8 years, Netflix has none of those. Every single HBO original is available on HBO only, and then 3 years later on Amazon Prime Instant Video. None of it available on Netflix. HBO doesn't carry any other programming, so Breaking Bad is not on HBO. They are perfect complements to one another. And so if you're a Netflix subscriber, it makes eminent sense to be an HBO over-the-top subscriber. And I think HBO has been fighting this battle because Time Warner has been fighting with cable companies about carrying TNT and CNN, and they didn't want to lose that. I don't know how they resolve that. That shocked me that they actually came up with it. But they're complementary. I don't think they cannibalize at all. I think it helps Netflix, and I hate Netflix. Like them as a service, hate them as a stock.
And you cover them?
I do. I have a sell rating. I've had a sell rating for 8 of the last 11 years. I had a buy on them from 17 to 83, but after that they got too expensive. In any case, they're complementary. I don't think they hurt each other at all.
I totally agree with that. I think they're just such different services that, really, if you were to look at what a consumer should get, I totally agree. You get HBO, get Netflix, and you're pretty well covered for what you're going to be watching.
So with a click of a mouse or some other device, a year from now or 5 years from now, you can get HBO for a period of time, unsubscribe when something you don't want to watch or something you do want to watch comes on when its season starts, although season requires a whole new series of definitions these days. So HBO is not a threat to Netflix. So was Netflix a threat to HBO, though? Is that partly what prompted their hand to do what they're doing? Dunia's shaking her head yes. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think so. I think they've been watching it closely for a long time, and they've had to figure out how they can not cannibalize their one model by expanding into this kind of subscription model outside of traditional carriage, or pay service, but within traditional carriage. And I think they've obviously figured it out. But they've been looking at Netflix for a long time, because for those people who needed to add HBO but were, either cord shaving or cord cutting, probably Netflix was starting to make a lot of sense, because it has, the genres in Netflix go across the board, and they have, children's programming is a huge business for them. And so, yeah, absolutely. I think HBO looked at that, but they figured it out. And that's the thing, right? You have to figure it out, and you have to, move and catch up with kind of the consumer, because they'll find that content. They'll get that content. But to the point of unbundling, and it's, a year ago or so, I was much more skeptical about unbundling, and obviously, which is why I'm not so keen on predictions, but it's coming a bit quicker than I expected. And I think it'll be one of those things that will ramp up, and the consumer will feel this huge benefit, right? I get to pay for what I want, and it's piecemeal. But they'll start at some point seeing, well, but now I wanted this, which I don't have through these different services, and I'm paying, so iTunes or whatever the service is, to get it piecemeal. And at some point, they'll start adding the media dollars and realizing, I'm now spending just as much, so I could move back to kind of a tier of cable that gives me the AMC, and then I'll pay extra because I love HBO, or I'll pay $10 extra because I want the Netflix as well. So I think it'll be an interesting curve.
Well, it's also the household, right? And it's the demographic of the family, right? If you're 25, you're a single person, you're watching what you watch. The second, when we have these conversations with people about bundling, the theory is always that it's cheaper, right? Yeah. And they see what they watch, and they're like, I watch this, channel, this channel, this channel, and that's all I watch. And then you say to them, okay, what does the other people in your household watch? And the more people in a household, the more that cost goes from here to here. So it's not age so much as it's the, the point you are in your life, and what your household looks like, and the ways in where you're consuming.
And ComScore just did a study of household use of Netflix, and the largest percentage penetration is households with 6 people or more in
Right.
them. So it was like 95% of households with 6 people or more, some crazy number, and you could see it exponentially. So single person households were okay, but each time you add a person, which totally makes sense.
Yeah. So, I mean, there already is changes in bundling to have smaller bundles, and with the companies we're working with, that idea of making more tailored bundles is definitely something that, as far as I'm concerned, they're all looking at. So unbundling completely, we're probably a ways away from, but smaller bundles and, sports, sports is always quoted as the main reason people watch live TV, but there's a whole set of population who doesn't. And they get, they're also the most vocal about, why am I paying these inflated costs? So it's interesting. Our view is live is big all the way around sports. Reality TV, by the way, is just crazy. People who watch reality TV are really into watching it live. So there are those kinds of programming that it matters how you view it, but at the same time, it has inflated the cost so much for households who aren't as tied to it.
Well, and I think the kind of second screen experience, or the social experience of watching television, has extended kind of beyond reality television. And, the need to watch those hot shows, or hot shows within, your peer group who likes those shows, is still there. We used to call it water cooler. Now it's, Facebook, Twitter, whatever, or texting as you're watching something. And I think that hasn't gone away.
It's interesting because we haven't published this yet, but we just did the update on TV content consumption, and this, between the time we did it a year and a half ago and now, that binge viewing and watching whole, catching up on series, et cetera, has become much more of a thing than it was. And there was a whole concept that we got across the board from people in investment, right? They saw watching TV and picking a series to watch as an investment. And they also felt like if they weren't caught up, that they were behind. And it was just really interesting watching the language changes and this need that if, it was whatever's the hot series, that they were actually caught up. They didn't have, it wasn't as bad as live, right? Live, they wanted to watch that moment. The others, they had to be within a day or so. But this whole concept of those shows and the need to catch up and invest the time in the series was really a fundamental shift.
That investment, though, is, I think, a function of the increase in programming of serialized dramas, where you can't watch this season's Walking Dead and have any idea what's going on unless you've watched the first 3 or 4. And you couldn't watch season 4 of Breaking Bad without watching the first 3, but you could watch season 9 of Seinfeld and you wouldn't need to know anything. So we've seen a change, a shift, and I actually don't understand the programming side of this. I don't know why the networks have done that. Maybe it's because it builds brand loyalty, but there's definitely been a shift, probably starting about 10 years ago with Lost, or I don't know if that was the first one, but in favor of that. 24 was serialized drama, but each season was a standalone, so you could watch season 3. You cannot watch season 3 of Breaking Bad. It just makes no sense at all. So I think that's the investment, and I just watched an episode of The Blacklist for the first time last week, and I felt like I knew what was going on. I don't know that there is a serial. There must be a serial thread, but it didn't matter to me. I think broadcast is worse at it than cable. AMC, they take more chances, and far worse at it than HBO. You could not watch Boardwalk Empire or Game of Thrones and have any clue what's going on if you started watching it right now.
Binge viewing, though, really started with when the DVD was introduced. It didn't happen on VHS, but once the DVD came to being, within a couple of years of that, a whole season was offered. It became a common term, in my opinion anyway, once Netflix started doing it. Everybody woke up to the fact, but it had really been around. DVDs were introduced, the standard definition DVD anyway, somewhere around 1997. Anyway, so we talked about the unbundling in one way, shape, or form. So is the business model going to be smaller bundles, subscriptions, or are we going to get to a point where we're going to have Michael's 28 gigs for a family, and we're going to get from our broadband provider, Comcast or Charter or whoever it might be, X amount of data coming through the pipe, and that's how we pay for it, or something else? Any what is it in China, Larry?
Well, in China, it's actually interesting because, again, you don't have all this legacy stuff there. Pretty much it's the model, and I think the model is going to hold true for the U.S. at the end of the day. Looking at the U.S. model, it's hard to say what's going to be because everybody is, all the corporations are defensive. I mean, they're all trying to hang on to what was as opposed to realize what is. Ultimately, the consumer wins. The question is how long it takes to get to that point. So I think it's you pay for a certain amount of data, and then you pick what you want to do. Because convenience, you don't want to be Netflix this week and HBO next week and, you know, make all those changes and stuff. You just want to have the pipe and then move between and then be charged.
The Chinese games industry is actually a good illustration of what I think is going to happen with film content. They stole everything. And so no one could sell a PC game in China in the 90s. It just didn't exist. They had hundreds of millions of PCs, and no one could sell a game in China. So some enterprising game company came up with the idea of offering games for free, server-based games for free, and then extracting rent from them by charging them for internet connections. So they went to internet cafes, or charging them for microtransactions for items in the game. That went from standing start probably in 98 or 9 to a $25 billion business annual right now. So free-to-play games is gigantic. The game console business peaked in 2008 at about 22 billion. It's down to 11 billion now. So the free-to-play market dwarfs it, starting in China. But the difference in content is really striking. You don't get Call of Duty multiplayer. You don't get FIFA with 11 guys on the side and fully customizable teams. You get YouTube type stuff. You get bite-sized Angry Birds, Candy Crush. There are more involved games. League of Legends is one, but they're not quite up to that standard because the game guys, in how they manage their content, are windowing. They're selling the $60 experience to the console market. They're selling the bite-sized experience into the free-to-play market, and they're monetizing a different way. I think that parallel is, you're going to see a parallel to that with film content. That's why I think, you know, it's YouTube video versus Avatar in IMAX 3D. And you're going to pay $15 to see Avatar 2 in IMAX 3D, and you're going to pay nothing to watch a YouTube video, and you'll suffer through product placement or an advertisement. I think you're going to see that with filmed content as well. And it might be free TV. It might be the Twilight Zone is free with a bunch of ads on the internet. That's great. That'll happen. That should happen yesterday. But I don't think you're going to see this week's episode of The Blacklist in China at the same time. It's just not going to happen.
So you mentioned, you know, advertising, you know, it's got to be paid for in some fashion, subscriptions or not. You mentioned a ComScore study. Nielsen obviously tracks viewers. You know, from an OTT point of view, you can really tell who's online, what they watch exactly, more so than you can with other systems, even with the electronic systems. I got involved in a panel this summer about eye tracking and facial recognition, where one of the panelists had a pair of glasses that their company put out. It's a Swedish-based company called Tobii, and they did an experiment at a ballpark in Cleveland, I think the Cleveland ballpark, where a group of people, were tracked as to what their eyes were looking at, how much time they were watching the field, how much they were watching different billboards across the entire stadium. TVs are coming to market in a few years. You know, hopefully we'll all have to opt into it with a camera built in so we know who's in the room. Is that going to be a way to track for advertisers? What other ways are we going to be able to tell advertisers how many people are watching so that they will fund part of that show to keep our subscription costs down?
I don't know. I mean, I've always been dubious of that. You know, privacy is still kind of at the forefront of people. And as soon as they get you're willing to give so much, but then when you're faced with the absolute knowledge that your privacy is infringed upon, I think people's reaction is very different. I think that's probably on the same trajectory as 3D TV.
As eye tracking?
Yeah, integrated in a television set. I don't.
There are obviously there will be opt-in
See that.
experiences. So Nielsen is an opt-in if you're a Nielsen household.
Mhm.
There's a company called Vigil that has an app on phones and tablets, and it acts like Shazam, so it will actually listen to what you're watching, and it will recognize that you're watching American Idol, and you get points, and you can buy Big Macs or whatever with the points. So, and they have I think 1 or 2 million people signed up who opt in. There are our younger generation, and I would say I have 14-year-old identical twin daughters. They're remarkably stupid about sharing content and sharing everything about themselves. They will check in anywhere. They'll take a video anywhere. I cannot tell you how many of their friends have been been grounded for life for posting videos of things that they shouldn't be doing. So it's amazing. And fortunately not sex yet, but just like out on a Wednesday night, school night at 2:30 in the morning, stealing shopping carts and videoing it, posting it on Instagram. It's unbelievable. And so I don't know. I mean, I think that our kids are exhibitionists. And so I'm not sure that this whole privacy thing is how much it will change. I don't think they're as concerned about it as we are. They really want to share everything. So I think the opt-in services, and I actually think this is good for Nielsen, are going to thrive. And I also think Amazon Web Services, please visualize Jeff Bezos like that as Dr. Evil, because he is. Amazon Web Services, he's, again, in a good way. They're going to gather information. They probably aren't going to ever sell your individual information, but they want to control everything that happens on the internet and aggregate that information. There's a monetization scheme there. Google does it, obviously. So, I mean, Google even knows if you're looking for pirated content. So, and has been called to task for that. So I think that actually privacy concerns are going to diminish as we all die off and our kids start to run the world.
Well, it is the millennial generation that's driving it. Cindy mentioned that about the consumers driving it, and we all have actually.
But,
so, go ahead.
Back to the point of life stage, right? That millennial. There are some very different life stages you get into, and so I think that there's a limited span where you have more of a free spirit about your privacy, and as you age and that different life stage, and with it, financials and responsibilities. I still think I don't see that turning around.
I disagree. There's an app, and I encourage you all to get this if you have children, called Life 360. I have it on my phone right now. I can pull up where my kids are right this second. And the only way that they can fudge on that is to hand their phone to somebody else. Never happening with my daughters. It's an appendage. They cannot be without their phone. So they know that they're busted if they're not at school during school day, or if they're out after 10 outside somewhere. They know they're dead meat. And they know I can check, and I check all the time. And they voluntarily gave that up. That was the price that they had to pay to get a phone. So I encourage you to download it. But again, it's kind of how we're now conditioning our children that it's okay to be tracked. And again, I'm participating in this because I want to track my kids. If I had that when I was a kid, I probably would have been grounded for life several times.
So when I had a phone.
I didn't have a phone, thank God. My kids asked me how old I was when I got my first cell phone. I said 31. And they go, why did you wait so long? And I said, I was the first person I knew who had one. I said, 1986, and it was a break.
Wow.
I am that old.
I got one more thing, and then I'm going to switch to Q&A. You mentioned 3D, and you'll be first, okay? You mentioned 3D. We were talking about 4K earlier, the lack of content with 4K, although Larry mentioned one of the things he's doing in China. He didn't say it today, but he's told me previously is in 4K. What did we learn about the 3D experience or lack thereof that will help us in getting to a 4K universe, if ever?
It's content.
Okay.
Well,
I have to agree, but
it's also cost, right? So part of the issue with 3D, especially in films, is, you know, if you're doing it as a family, right, the threshold for what you're going to pay, if your ticket price is $10 for not 3D and your ticket price is $20 for 3D, you know, that cost for a family goes up exponentially. So it's really, again, matching to the content and the experience so that you're really getting something, and where it makes sense, as opposed to, you know, a couple of years ago when it seemed like every single movie was going to be delivered as a 3D movie, whether it should be or not, because it was the thing.
yeah.
And but then there was the backlash that said, I don't really, that cost threshold is too high. So I think it's going to be the same thing. But I mean, technology like 4K is just a cycle, right? As opposed to 3D, which is more of a specialized experience. 4K is just going to happen because it's going to.
No, it'd be just like smart TV now. It's hard to find a brand new TV that's not a smart TV. It'll be impossible to find a brand new television that's not 4K in 5 years because they're just going to make them.
Right, and the cameras are going to film it,
Right.
and
So we're going to get them.
it's-
Unlike
Yeah.
HD,
Yeah.
where we all had to spend twice as much as we did, or more, 5 times as much as we did on our prior television.
I mean, from a production point of view, there's hardly a TV show at all, and most feature films are shooting in 4K now. If for no other reason, it's the cameras are there, the
Right.
digital cameras are really, the Reds, the RE Alexa and other cameras are really good for that, and you have to future-proof.
Mhm.
I
Anything?
mean, we're shooting everything at, you know, our plans are everything at 4K. I mean, we don't want to be the guys owning a library of, you know, black and white TV shows and, you know, getting pennies for those when we could be on the other side of the curve. I mean, if you look at the last great, you know, transformations, you know, HD, those first companies that started shooting in HD, everybody who bought an HD set would gravitate to those programs to take advantage of that device. You go back even further and you look at the introduction of color TV, you know, Disney with Wide World of Color, you know, had a huge ratings advantage over everybody else because when you spent that extra money to get that color TV, you wanted to have something on it. So as a TV producer, we're moving to that incredibly quickly.
You know, many years ago, the Artists' Rights Foundation had a real problem with colorizing movies and TVs. That was before the age of digital, when they were basically painting video. Now, a digital colorization is accepted because that younger generation won't watch anything in black and white. Let's go to Q&A. Gentleman right here, please.
Sure. I'm Bill Woods with MediaMark. Look, a lot of the talk about HBO nobility that came out last week happened to be right the same day that they were at an analyst conference trying to defend why they turned down an offer from Rupert Murdoch in the 80s. Stock seems to be living in the 60s. They got to do something. So kind of on the cost of content, we don't know what they're going to price for that. Let's say it's going to be the same pace you paid part of your DirecTV bundle. Who's going to be the first on the virtual MSO? Who's going to be the one that breaks third on that? Is it going to be Charlie Ergen with Dish coming out with some service?
Comcast is light years ahead of everybody else. And the Comcast Time Warner merger has nothing to do with cable. It's internet. So Comcast wants to be the internet provider to 25% of all households. And then they will go over the top and they will cut a deal with AT&T Uverse and with Fios. They'll be first. And they're so far ahead of this. And I don't know Ergen, but I've heard that he is the smartest guy in the room. Notwithstanding the 30 Rock, you know, calling the Comcast guys Cable Town, they are wickedly smart. They so get it. It's unbelievable. Top to bottom, the grunts there get it. There's a mission. They're going over the top.
I got to think Echo Star and Dish are right behind it because he's been talking
yeah,
about
he's
it. He's been talking about buying Sprint, you know, or buying more Spectrum. So that's part of where tethering your phone to your laptop right there to get what you need. If you've got a 28 gig plan or a 50 gig plan, which will cost you nothing, that's a possibility. And the two could dovetail, in my opinion. Anybody else on that topic? We'll go to another question. Go ahead.
So I was just going to say, you know, on a hardware perspective, then I would predict that maybe someone like an Apple is talking to these guys as well, and that all may be delivered by a fantastic looking Apple box. Right. Right.
Gentleman back there.
Well, as a follow-on to that, the PSS that Dish was working on was ESPN got licensed in a sub-bundle, was really intriguing. But now you're hearing that they're going to have to upcharge for broadcast networks the Sony virtual MVPD is now talking $60 to $80, not $30. So it looks like the pack herd mentality of the bundles are staying fairly close. So does over the top get that price point down, or can you actually work with the big bundling groups to get something down in the $30 rate, which is that middle ground? Or is it going to have to be done with other kinds of programming because they still won't let you get down there?
Anybody? What?
I think Comcast's initial plan would be to be in 100% of households. So just forget territorial geographic restrictions that imposed by FCC, and just I live in a charter neighborhood, and just because they suck, I have DirecTV. I would switch to Comcast over the top, and they can get me as a subscriber at $85 a month from zero. So they're going to just sell incremental, conventional packages. But yes, in order to penetrate everybody globally, sure, they've got to go. They aren't going to get the content outside the U.S. So their Comcast will be restricted. Dish, he is in other countries. That guy's pretty smart. I don't know. I mean, their biggest asset is that spectrum, and he has a lot of spectrum, mostly because when we go to 4K broadcast, there's a spectrum auction. He's going to win big time. So I mean, that's really his ace in the hole, is he's going to retire with more billions than he's got now.
Other questions? Got to be somebody. Did we answer? We answered all sorts of stuff here today. Is that right? Covered a lot of topics. Go ahead.
Yeah, the question with the FiOS and the AT&Ts and the like, are they going to go ahead and just sell you your wire, and then everything else they're going to be able to bundle, or not, pick and choose it from there off, and go ahead and be a la carte? So we're just going to put the wire in your house, and you can use that to do your games and your smart TVs or whatever you want. That's where they're going to go ahead and make their price point, and then you can pick and choose whatever you want to put on top of that.
The single most profitable business in telecom is internet service. We consume, I'm just a guess here, about 100 gigabytes a month of data if we're Netflix subscribers, and we pay an average of $60. So they make 60 cents a gigabyte. We consume about, it depends on if you watch standard def or high def, 40 or 50 gigabytes a month on Netflix, and you pay $8. So you're paying like 13 cents. You pay so much more for the service than you do for the content. It's crazy. And it's just not even close. So all of them, their goal is we all have high-speed internet plans, and they upsell us more data than we need. I told you I had the $100 Sprint mobile plan for 28 gigabytes. I actually lied. It's 100 for 28. I took the upsell to 60 gigabytes for 130. I have no idea why, but they're making $30 a month for me as an annuity, and they got it. And it's worth probably $3,000 because I actually don't know how many gigabytes we consume, which I think is 4. I think that's all we were using. No, I really think that is the number. But we got iPhone 6s and they're big screen, and I think my kids will watch video. I don't even know. So the dumb internet consumer is the target for everybody. And that's really where the money is, because none of us have any concept of what internet service is worth, and we're stupid enough to pay up for it. But somehow we think we know what TV service is worth. So I actually think the answer to the question about unbundling, you're going to get segmentation to sell internet. That's what Comcast is really trying to do, and that's what HBO is not trying to sell internet, but HBO is trying to get into those households as well. Ultimately, I think that nirvana for the Comcast of the world is 100 million Comcast internet households, and we don't care if they're paying us $5 a month for content. So I think that's where it really does go.
Last question would be gentleman back here who had his hand up before, if you still have a question.
Yes, simply with all disaggregation, actually 2 questions. One is the internet ready for this in terms of spectrum and bandwidth?
Yeah.
Can it actually deliver the 4K to everybody from everybody?
Oh, bandwidth, internet. It's infrastructure. You need probably 10x the fiber lines.
Right.
And the question is going to be, will 6G and 8G telecom come up with something where you can actually broadcast faster over the air as opposed to through fiber? The Ericsson guys who are in the business of building cell towers think so. So ultimately, your internet connection device might be your phone, and it might sit in the docking station, and it might talk to your TV. But again, I totally don't get the physics of that, but they're talking enough cell towers, and you absolutely could do that. And we're talking now, I have something in my house called an Airwave. It's a Sprint box. It's a little mini cell tower, and it actually rebroadcasts a cell signal in my house, so I get 5 bars in my house from all of our phones. ultimately, maybe that's the answer, that we have distributed internet. But I don't really understand how it works, or I don't know why it works.
And I was curious about.
I don't get why water is hot when I turn on the left tap
Well,
either. So right tap there.
Well, we could continue for another hour or so. I still have about 10 more questions on my prep list, but there's not enough time. Join me in thanking the panel for a great job today, please.